Page 1. In the small, unassuming town of Hollow Creek, a dimly lit figure emerged from the shadows, her every step a testament to her tormented past. With every stride, her worn, weathered boots seemed to drag the weight of a history drenched in the blood of her creators, the cruel townsfolk who had once deemed her a freak and threw her away. Her features were obscured by the tattered rags that served as her costume. Her eyes were a cold and haunting void, and her clown makeup, once a symbol of joy, now twisted into an expression of unyielding fury. This was Marlena, the anti-heroine, the tormented clown whose destiny was to be the harbinger of death, exacting retribution upon those who had wronged her so many years ago. As she approached her first target, the lecherous bartender who had not only mocked her, but had also robbed her of what little dignity she had left, a sinister grin crept across her face. Her small hands clenched into fists, and the sharp, rusted blades at her wrists glinted ominously in the pale moonlight. She had spent months, perhaps even years, perfecting her craft, learning the art of deception as she pieced together the anarchy that had once been her life. Each step closer brought her closer to the twisted sense of justice she so desperately craved, and the bartender, oblivious to the impending doom that lay just inches away, continued his lewd banter with the patrons, completely unaware of the nightmare that was about to engulf him. Marlena's approach was as silent as the grave, her presence barely noticeable in the hushed whispers of the night. Yet within her, a storm of rage and vengeance raged like a tempest, her heart a black pit of despair and fury. She had been the town's laughing stock, the outcast, the one who was to be feared and loathed for her difference. But now, the tables had turned, and the bartender's demise would be the first of many, a brutal reminder of the consequences of oppression and neglect. With a swift motion, she pulled the blades from her wrists, the air echoing with the thud of metal against wood as they struck their target. The bartender's screams were muffled by the sound of blood and the crunch of his shattered bones as Marlena's vicious laughter filled the air. The townspeople of Hollow Creek were plagued by a chilling presence, a sense that something was amiss, even as they went about their nightly routines. The bartender's disappearance was the first of many, and with each passing victim, the townsfolk grew more and more paranoid, their once peaceful existence now overshadowed by an omnipresent dread. The police, led by the stoic and determined Sheriff Thomas, tried to maintain order amidst the chaos, but the nature of the crimes was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The victims were found in horrific conditions, their bodies mutilated and drained of blood, leaving behind only a trail of clown masks, a signature that no one could explain or understand. The legend of Marlena, the vengeful clown, had begun, and the town of Hollow Creek would never be the same. Page 2. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the townsfolk of Hollow Creek continued their lives in blissful ignorance, unaware that among them was the very force of horror that had taken residence in their midst. Marlena's nocturnal reign of terror was relentless, her deftness at evading capture a testament to the depth of her fury and the desperation that fueled her. It wasn't long before a curfew was imposed upon the town, a futile attempt to keep the citizens safe from the nightmarish plague that had taken hold of their community. Streets that had once buzzed with laughter and joy now lay silent and eerily still, as if the very air itself was infected with a malevolent presence. The town's council, desperate to reclaim some semblance of control, offered a hefty reward for information leading to the capture of the mysterious murderer. Banners were hung, flyers distributed, and the town square became a hub of activity as citizens banded together in an effort to end the terror. But for all their efforts, the shadow of Marlena loomed larger, her legend spreading like a cancer through the once close-knit community. The fear that gripped the townsfolk was a palpable force, a collective shudder that ran through the very bones of Hollow Creek. It was in these times of turmoil that the ties of friendship and familiarity began to fray, as suspicion and paranoia replaced trust and camaraderie. Meanwhile, Sheriff Thomas, whose guilt over his past connection to Marlena's tragic past grew with each passing day, struggled with the weight of his responsibility. His decision to banish the young clown from the town years ago had led to her downfall, her life spiraling into madness and vengeance. As he investigated each gruesome scene, he couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu, as if history were repeating itself in the most horrifying of ways. The faces of the victims began to blur together, their stories of pain and suffering mirroring Marlena's own traumatic experiences. The line between good and evil, between justice and vengeance, had become indistinguishable in the mind of the tormented lawman. It was during one of his late-night vigils, alone in the cold, empty town square, that Thomas was overcome by a devastating realization. The face of the tormented clown, her eyes filled with the same fury and despair that he had seen in the victims, flashed before his eyes. The hand that had dealt the cruel blow to Marlena, forcing her into a life of darkness and violence, was his own. In that chilling moment, the truth came pouring in. Marlena was his creation, his inadvertent avatar of retribution, a living testament to the consequences of his actions. The sheriff's hands trembled as he clutched the cold steel of his service revolver, a symbol of his guilt and the futility of his quest to stop the very monster he had brought into existence.